here's a question. How do we find what is sacred to us in each moment? I find issues with too much focus on the past or future. It feels as if I am on auto drive.
Who's driving the car? You see, I was one of those neurotic drivers, to put it mildly. And you could have perhaps asked, my Jewish father if there were two things that I thought I was good at. One of them was driving. I wanted to, and I prided myself upon being the most controlled, alert driver. And anyone who has ever ridden in a vehicle with me might say exactly the opposite. But you can either recognize that your car is being driven by something that is kind of like the neurotic control freak driver that I was. Or you can recognize that your car can be driven by someone other than your own personality identifications. You may not be able to identify who or what that someone is or how they're going to drive, and initially, well, that'll scare the shit out of you. And when it came to that point where, after so many years of driving Maharaji around, that's my beloved guru, he would always be so enveloped in the essence of the sacred. I could be driving him to an airport, I could be picking him up, we could be stopping out for lunch, and he would just see the beloved everywhere, in everything. He'd stop and we'd be waiting at the airport to go somewhere. I as his servant, basically. I loved it, every moment of it. And he would look at the airline tickets and say, United Airlines. Or perhaps he would look at a train station and see the same there, Grand Central Station. And he would get a giggle. He would look, we'd stop to put gas in the car, and he would see the same thing, He'd look at me and my neurosis driving, honking at people in the city, and then he would see Shell gas station. Ram Dass is in a Shell right now, pretending to be a person. And when I was pretending to be a person, I just wanted to get to where I was going so that I could feel something better than where I was. But Maharaji saw this grace, and he could laugh at it. An awakening human will laugh at his own game, often not as a mocking, simply as a way to amuse himself. And I recognized after some time of driving Maharaji around and being of the greatest service possible that I could stand to not take myself so seriously. I could stand to sometimes let other people do the driving. Not him, though, no. Heavens no. Just, why did it always have to be me? And I realized that I held too much stock in my own importance. I held too much stock not just in when I got there, but how succinctly I got there. Did I manage to find a quicker route? Not just did I get there on time. Was I comfortable? Was he comfortable? Was everything perfect? Over time, I recognized that that's just what the mind does. It wants to make everything so perfect. It wants to be in control. The only way to see the sacred is to release the control that the mind has over its own criticism, its own judgments, its own self-doubt, its own measurements, its own analysis of how something could be done or would be done better. It's difficult to do driving around in this city. But what if you're not the driver? Practically speaking, some of you will say, well, Ram Dass, don't own a car. Or you'll say, oh, well, Ram Dass, I like knowing what's going to happen in my life. I like being a complete neurotic control freak and calling it manifesting. Well, Ram Dass, I like being a complete neurotic control freak and calling it fully spiritually awakened. I like being a complete neurotic control freak and calling it having a good marriage, being a good parent, manifesting my purpose, using my abilities. I like to be a complete neurotic control freak and call it serving the world. Uncover your habits. Your habits simply cover the ways that you believe and you think that you are not worthy. Be fervent in uncovering whatever is keeping you from God. You know, we used to talk about this and people would say, well, do you renunciate, Ram Dass? I notice you don't have sex. I notice you don't have a partner. I notice you don't smoke or drink or have any of these thoughts of wanting to be outside of your grace. It's a circle in the mind that goes around and around. You know, and when I'm being, the Ram Dass, playing the game of Ram Dass, being the guru that you want me to be, of course, I show up and I would teach an event and be graceful. You put on the Ram Dass hat and you play the Ram Dass game, right? It's easy to be graceful in those scenarios. It's not about renunciation exactly. There are many of horny celibates, as I used to call it, that simply are focusing on what it's like to get to God. And the neuroses is still there in the background, beating up the celibate, constantly saying, but you still want sex, don't you? Therefore, you're not very godly now, are you? So, what being is behind those efforts saying, be this, don't do this, do that? When you say you're going to stop drinking, are you going to die of not drinking? You're going to die of the longing of not drinking. If you say you're going to stop smoking, now you're going to die of not smoking just by every day saying, it's too bad I can't smoke. I'm really thinking about smoking. And then you become someone who's thinking about not smoking. The game is like trying to hold a hot potato. And your hands get hot, yet you're still thinking about how hot they are or would be if you ate potatoes. Say if you are renunciating from starches this week, preparing for the big Thanksgiving meals or whatever we do in those games when we're playing the family games that are coming up, right? So when you simply observe what the mind is trying to do when it's playing the game of the driver of the car, it's playing a game with you. Observe that and ask, is that working for me? And then you don't have to stop thinking. The mind has its functions for whatever it is. But it's a matter of observing the breath, which I've done many times. Outside of the obvious thing that you know me for the drugs, right? Yeah. You know me for the person who seemed to meet all the grace that is from LSD. But that was a game of experimenting to evidence what God is and what God isn't until I recognized there is no isn't. I stopped looking for what is right here, not in front of me, not behind me, not here nor there, just here. So that means that it wasn't necessarily easy to see everything as sacred. But did it become easier to realize the love that is? Not to say that I could love my neuroses, they have their function. But do I love the function itself? And the beauty of the game itself? The gift of the game itself? It's learned, that love. That's the practice. You love the practice of the game. You love the beauty of the game. And that's it. It wasn't that I took out a manual and said, this is sacred, this isn't. So let's focus on this and turn your head towards everything else. If you are walking down the street right now and you see someone else, another you, and that other you just happens to be in a good mood that morning and says, well, hi there, Ram Dass. How's it going? We're making Monday good? Or we could meet another you, and the other you says, why do you have those guru clothes on? When I first awakened, I would wear all of this stuff, these beads and the clothes, and I'd want some good meals outside of the ashram. And of course, if you dress like an aspirant, you get treated as one. But then I had to make sure that I didn't order anything off the menu that would make me look non-guru-like, because that's not the game of the aspirant. Which you are you meeting? How are you loving the you that needs more love? Are you pushing those other yous away? It's only something to observe, not something to change. Not something to make different. It may be easy for someone to say, oh, the sacred is in nature. Well, not if you live in a 15-story high-rise and you've forgotten it. It may be easy to say the sacred is in sound when you live in the middle of a construction zone. It may be easy to say the sacred is in the renunciation of the drink when you look at someone else who's struggling with alcoholism. The sacred is the gift of the journey, and the sacred is your connection when you give the gift of presence to another being who has lost the way in the game. That's the essence of the sacred. The connection between one being pretending to be two, one pretending to be lost, and the other one pretending to find them or to help them find themselves, whatever that game is that you call realization. The sacred is in the fact that I can still play the game if I want, and help another awaken from it if they so choose. No one can define your sacred for you, because the sacred is an essence, not an action, not a result. It's as much in the preparation for the birthday party as it is in the blowing of the candles, as it is in cleaning up the trash as you're cursing all the balloons that you bought thereafter. The sacred is in the cursing itself. The sacred is in the born, the sacred is in the dying, especially the dying. You don't talk enough for me to stop talking, so.
You want me to interrupt you? You do?
I just imagine there's something more important than my ramblings in the world at this time.